What would you do if the man who sentenced you to a cage handed you the key to a $150,000 dream? The same hands that once locked the steel door behind me are the hands that now sign my paychecks. This is the story of how my judge, my jury, and my jailer became the reason I'm signing a $150,000 business deal today. I remember the cold, not the chill of the interrogation room, but the deeper cold that settles in your bones when you realize you've become the monster people warned you about. The handcuffs were tight, a final metallic click sealing my fate. The cop who put them on, his eyes weren't cruel. They were just empty. Like I was just another piece of garbage to be taken off the street. And he was right. That was 2018. My name is Leo. And this is the story of how that cop, Officer David Miller, went from being the man who arrested me to the man who now runs my $150,000 a year business. But this isn't just my story of redemption. It's his too. You know, it's a strange thing, hitting rock bottom. You think it's the end, but sometimes it's the only solid ground you've had to stand on in years. It's the place where you're forced to look up and finally see yourself for what you've become. Hey, is this story getting to you? Right there on your side of the screen. Being able to put yourself in the shoes of someone who lost everything and fought for a second chance is one of the most human things there is. If you've connected with this journey, do me a crucial favor. Drop a comment below and tell me what state you're watching from and what moment in the story touched your heart the most. That's how I know you're connected to our mission of spreading stories of redemption and believing that everyone deserves a chance to start over. And listen to this. The vast majority of people who get emotional with these stories aren't even subscribed to the channel yet. If you believe in second chances, I invite you to subscribe now. It's completely free and you'll keep receiving the deepest stories of human transformation straight into your feed. Also remember that at the end of this video, you'll find other incredible journeys of new beginnings on your screen. The world narrowed to the beam of his flashlight. It cut through the grimy interior of my beat-up sedan, illuminating the empty chip bags, the soda cans, and the small plastic baggie on the passenger seat floor. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. A stone dropped into a frozen lake. In the rearview mirror, I saw his silhouette approach, calm, deliberate. The tap on the window was polite, almost gentle. A lie. License and registration, son. Son. The word stung. I was 22, but I felt like a scolded child. My hands trembled as I fumbled through the glove compartment, the crumpled documents feeling like evidence against me. I was Leo, the high school dropout, the disappointment, the kid who thought he was smarter than the system, selling just enough to get by, to numb the constant ache of being a failure. Officer Miller's face was a mask of professional detachment. He didn't sneer, he didn't yell, he just processed. He ran my name and the weight in that silent car. The only sound the static from his patrol car radio was an eternity. Each crackle felt like a judgment. When he returned, his posture had changed. It was stiffer. Step out of the vehicle, please. It was over. I knew it. He knew it. The subsequent pat-down, the discovery of the rest of the stash in my pocket, the reading of my rights, it all blurred into a humiliating, terrifying ritual. But one moment is seared into my memory, clearer than anything. As he guided my head down, placing his hand on the crown to avoid me hitting the doorframe of his cruiser, our eyes met. For a split second, the mask slipped. I didn't see anger or contempt. I saw a flicker of something worse, pity, and profound disappointment. It was the look my father gave me the day I left home for the last time. In the back of that car, the cage separating us, I finally broke. The tears weren't for the arrest or the potential jail time. They were for the life I had thrown away. The dreams I'd sold for a quick buck. the person I had become. I sobbed, my forehead pressed against the cold, smudged glass. I saw him watching me in the rearview mirror. He didn't say a word. He just drove, his eyes occasionally meeting mine in the reflection, that same unreadable expression on his face. At the station, during the booking process, he was efficient, cold. He took my fingerprints, the ink a permanent stain on my skin, and my record. When he led me to the cell, the sound of the metal door closing was the loudest, most final sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my future locking shut. He walked away, without a backward glance, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I was alone. Just me, the cold concrete bench, and the ghost of the person I was supposed to be. That night, in the deafening silence of a holding cell with 3 other broken men, I made a promise to myself. It was a desperate, naive promise, born of sheer panic and regret. I swore that if I ever got out, I would change. I wouldn't just want to change. I would force myself to become someone new. Someone that cop, that disappointed father, that lost kid in the car, wouldn't have to pity. I didn't know how. I just knew I had to. That cell wasn't just a prison for my body. It was the rock bottom I needed to break myself open and see what, if anything, was left inside. The next 6 months were a study in grey. The county jail was a world of concrete, steel, and a constant, low-grade hum of human misery. Time lost all meaning, measured only in the slop of tasteless meals, the count times, and the slow march of days on a calendar I scratched into the wall with a stolen plastic fork. My promise to change felt like a joke in there, a fragile dream whispered in a hurricane. Survival was the only curriculum. I was assigned to a work detail, laundry. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and sweat, the industrial washers groaning like dying beasts. It was mind-numbing, repetitive work, but in that monotony, my mind had nowhere to hide. I'd fold 1,000 identical rough towels, and with each fold, I'd replay my life. The good moments, sitting on the porch with my grandma, the smell of her pies, the pride in her eyes when I aced a test in the 8th grade. Then the bad. The first time I stole from her purse. The first time I got high to quiet the noise in my head. The look on my mom's face when the police came to our door a year before this arrest for a smaller charge. I had become a statistic, a cliché, a fatherless kid who made all the wrong choices. I saw Officer Miller once during that time. He was in the courthouse, testifying in another case. I was being shuffled in shackles for a pre-trial hearing. He was in his crisp uniform, standing tall, a pillar of the world I had rejected. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway. There was no recognition at first, just a cop looking at an inmate. Then something shifted, a slight narrowing of his eyes. He remembered me, the crying kid in the back of his cruiser. He gave a barely perceptible nod, not of friendship, not of encouragement, but of acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away. That small nod, for some reason, meant more to me than any lecture. It meant I had been seen, not just processed. My court-appointed lawyer was a harried man with coffee stains on his tie. He laid it out for me. With my record, I was looking at a minimum of 2 years in state prison. My stomach turned to lead. But then he mentioned a new program, an alternative sentencing initiative for nonviolent offenders. It was a long shot, he said. It involved a strict rehab program, followed by 6 months in a halfway house, and then 2 years of intensive probation. It was harder than prison in a way. Prison, you just served time. This, you had to work. You had to be vulnerable. You had to change. I took the deal. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that had seen every lie, scrutinized me. This is your one chance, Mr. Evans. Your one get-out-of-jail-free card. I suggest you use it wisely. The gavel hit. It was the sound of a starting pistol. Rehab was its own kind of hell. It wasn't about physical confinement. It was an emotional excavation. They made you talk. They made you feel. They made you confront the rot inside you that you'd been trying to numb for years. I wanted to quit every single day. I wanted to go back to the simple, quiet misery of jail. But I remembered the sound of that cell door. I remembered the pity in Officer Miller's eyes. And I remembered my grandma's pies. So I stayed. I talked. I cried. I got angry. I started to rebuild, piece by shattered piece, the person I was before the world. And I decided he wasn't good enough. The day I was released to the halfway house was terrifying. The world was too loud, too bright, too fast. I was free, but I was still in a cage. The cage was now my record, my probation, the judgment in the eyes of every potential employer who saw the box checked yes for a felony conviction. This was the real test. The walls were gone, but the barriers were higher than any I'd faced behind bars. I had a bed, a curfew, and a list of rules longer than my arm. But I also had a sliver of hope. It was fragile, like a seedling pushing through cracked concrete, but it was alive. I had to prove that the judge was right. I had to prove that the kid in the back of the police car was worth more than his worst mistake. The fight was just beginning, and the battlefield was the outside world. Freedom was a paradox. The sky was vast and unobstructed, but I felt more confined than ever. The halfway house was a dilapidated building that smelled of stale cigarettes and lost hope. My room had a window, but the view was of a brick wall. It felt symbolic. I was out, but the world was still refusing to let me in. My parole officer, a man named Stevens, with the weary patience of someone who'd seen 1,000 versions of me fail, gave me the script. Get a job. Any job. Report any income. Don't miss curfew. Don't associate with known felons. Don't leave the county. The list was a chain around my ankle, lighter than iron, but just as effective. So, I hit the pavement. I printed 50 resumes on the halfway house's wheezing printer. Under work experience, I had a glaring 5-year gap. I'd lie and they'd find out. I'd tell the truth, and I'd see it, the flicker in their eyes, the shift from casual interest to cold dismissal. The "we'll be in touch" that never came. It was a daily ritual of humiliation. The manager at a fast food joint actually laughed. "We can't have a felon handling cash, son. Liability, son." There was that word again. It didn't sting anymore. It just felt like a fact. I took the only work I could find, under the table. Manual labor, hauling scrap metal for a guy who paid in cash and contempt. My hands were constantly cut and grimy, my back a permanent ache. It was a different kind of prison yard. I'd come home exhausted, stinking of sweat and rust, and lie on my thin mattress, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering if this was it. If this was what I had fought for in rehab. This scraping, desperate existence. The hope I'd nurtured was fading, replaced by a grim resignation. This was my life now, the edge of society, looking in. And then I saw him. Officer Miller. It was a Tuesday. I was walking back from the scrapyard, my body screaming for a shower, my spirit just screaming. I stopped at a small grocery store to buy a loaf of bread, the cheapest one I could find. And there he was, in the cereal aisle, in civilian clothes, jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He looked ordinary, human. He was comparing the prices of 2 boxes of cornflakes, a slight frown of concentration on his face. My breath hitched. Every instinct told me to turn and run, to avoid the man who was a walking, breathing reminder of my lowest point. But I was rooted to the spot. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. The recognition was instant. His frown deepened, but it wasn't anger. It was calculation. He was assessing me, taking in my dirty clothes, the fatigue etched on my face, the loaf of cheap bread in my hand. I saw him piece it together, the release, the struggle, the sheer hard slog of it. He gave me that same, barely perceptible nod from the courthouse. Then he did something that shattered my entire understanding of the world. He walked towards me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this a violation of my parole? Was he going to question me? Frisk me right here next to the breakfast cereals? He stopped a few feet away. "Leo," he said. He remembered my name. His voice was different, softer, devoid of the official authority I remembered. "Officer," I managed, my voice a dry croak. "It's David. I'm off the clock." He glanced at my bread. "You making it out here?" The question was so simple, so direct, it disarmed me completely. The lies, the defenses I'd built, they crumbled. I just shook my head, a tiny, pathetic motion. "It's hard." He was silent for a moment, his gaze steady. I expected a lecture, "I told you so," a piece of useless advice. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. It wasn't a police card. It was plain white. "I have a friend," he said, handing it to me. "He owns a landscaping company. Good guy. He's understanding. Tell him I sent you. His name's Mark." I stared at the card, then back at him, utterly bewildered. This was the last thing I expected. Pity I could handle. Contempt I was used to. But this quiet, practical offer of help from the man who'd cuffed me. It felt like a crack in the universe. Why? The word was out of my mouth before I could stop it. David Miller looked at me, and for the first time I saw past the cop. I saw a man who was tired. "Because I've arrested a lot of kids like you," he said quietly. "Most of them I never see again. They either go back inside or they disappear. You looked at me in that car. I saw something in your eyes that night. It wasn't just fear. It was shame. And shame means you still know the difference between right and wrong." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "Don't make me regret this, Leo." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, clutching a business card and a loaf of bread, my entire world tilted on its axis. The invisible walls I'd felt around me, one of them had just developed a door. And the man who'd once locked me in had just handed me the key. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. For 3 days, I didn't call. I'd take it out, stare at the raised letters of Green Horizons Landscaping, and my thumb would hover over my cheap, prepaid phone. Fear is a powerful poison. Fear that this Mark guy would laugh at me. Fear that David Miller had changed his mind and had already called his friend to warn him about the felon he might meet. The greatest fear of all? That I would get this chance, this single, fragile thread of hope, and I would mess it up. It felt safer to stay in the familiar misery of the scrap yard than to risk a new kind of failure. But on the 4th morning, I woke up with the memory of that cell door clanging shut in my ears. It was a sound I never wanted to hear again. I went outside the halfway house into the weak morning light and I dialed the number. My hands were shaking. Mark answered on the second ring. His voice was brisk, no nonsense. "Green Horizons," I stammered. "Hi, my name is Leo Evans. David Miller gave me your card. He said you might be hiring." There was a pause on the other end. I braced for the hang-up. Then, "Miller, huh? All right. Can you be at the yard at 7 a.m. tomorrow? It's a trial day. Cash. You show up on time. You work hard. You don't complain. We'll see." That was it. No interview, No questions about my past. Just a test. Yes, sir. 7 a.m. I'll be there. The next morning I was there at 6:30, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The yard was a fenced-in lot filled with mowers, trimmers, bags of mulch, and a small weathered crew of men who looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. Mark was a bear of a man with a sun-beaten face and eyes that missed nothing. He tossed me a pair of worn leather gloves. Ever run a commercial mower? No, sir. Good. I don't have to break you of bad habits. Roberto will show you. You listen to him. You break something. You tell me. You lie to me. You're done. Ah, it was the hardest physical work I had ever done. The mower was a beast, vibrating my entire skeleton. The sun was relentless. My back ached, my hands blistered and then calloused beneath the gloves. We hauled heavy pavers, dug trenches for irrigation lines, spread mulch that stained my skin and clothes. But it was a clean tired, a different kind of exhaustion than the one I felt at the scrapyard. At the end of that first day, drenched in sweat and dirt, Mark handed me $100 in cash. It was more money than I'd held in months, earned with my own, honest labor. Be here tomorrow, was all he said. I was, every day. I became a ghost on the crew, silent, efficient, desperate to prove myself. I learned to identify plants, to edge a lawn so it looked like a sharp crease, to lay sod so perfectly it looked like it had always been there. I was building something, creating order and beauty out of chaos. It was a physical metaphor for what I was trying to do with my life. About a month in, David Miller showed up at the yard. My blood ran cold. Was he checking up on me? Was this a violation? He and Mark talked by Mark's truck for a few minutes, then Mark pointed over at me. David nodded and started walking my way. I was on a mower, and I killed the engine, the sudden silence feeling accusatory. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. He looked at the lawn I had just finished, a vast green carpet lined with perfect, crisp edges. Mark says you're his best worker, David said. No hello, no small talk, just the fact, laid bare. I didn't know what to say. I just show up. That's most of it, he replied, his eyes scanning the work. He says you're a natural, that you see the land, not just the job. It was the first genuine compliment I'd received in years. It wasn't about being a good person or being reformed. It was about a skill, a competence. It filled a part of me I didn't know was empty. He looked at me then, really looked at me. You're doing good, Leo. Just keep showing up. He turned and walked back to his car. He hadn't come to check on a parolee. He had come to check on an employee. The distinction was everything. In that moment, the invisible wall didn't just have a door. It had a window, and for the first time I could see a future on the other side. It was green, and it was growing, one blade of grass at a time. The seasons turned. The lush green of summer gave way to the fiery palette of autumn, and then to the stark, sleeping silence of winter. I was no longer the new guy on Mark's crew. I was his right hand. He trusted me with keys to the yard, with driving the truck, with handling client consultations. The cash payments turned into a real, taxable paycheck with my name on it. I opened a bank account. The feeling of that debit card in my wallet was a strange and powerful sort of magic. It wasn't just money, it was legitimacy. David became a quiet, steady presence in my life. He'd stop by the yard every few weeks, not as a cop, not even as a benefactor, but as a friend. It was a word I didn't dare use, but I had no other for it. We'd talk about work. He'd ask about a tricky landscaping job, and I'd explain the drainage problem we'd solved or the specific perennials we'd planted for a client who wanted year-round color. He listened with a focused intensity that made me feel like an expert. He was the first person who ever made me feel smart. One bitter, cold evening in January, he found me in the shed, repairing a broken snowblower. My hands were black with grease, my breath pluming in the frigid air. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "you're wasting your talent just working for someone else." I looked up, startled. "What do you mean? Mark's been great to me." "He has. And he'd be the first to tell you that you've outgrown this place." David gestured around the shed, at the tools, the mowers, the whole operation. "You understand the business now. You manage the crews when Mark's not here. You handle the difficult clients. You've got an eye for design he never had. You could run your own show." I laughed, a short, harsh sound in the cold shed. "With what? My stellar credit? My extensive savings? I'm a felon, David. No bank is going to give me a loan to buy a lawnmower, let alone start a business." He was silent for a moment, watching me. "What if you didn't need a bank?" I stopped what I was doing, the wrench freezing in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "I've been saving," he said, his voice calm, matter of fact. "I was going to use it for a new deck, but I've been watching you for over a year now, Leo. I've seen you in the heat of July and the freeze of January. I've seen you deal with rude customers and fix broken equipment on the fly. That deck, it's just a deck. This is a person. This is a life." The air left my lungs. I couldn't speak. He was offering to invest in me. The cop who arrested me was offering to be my business partner. I can't let you do that," I finally stammered. "It's too much." "The risk?" "Life is risk," he interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "Arresting you was a risk. Giving Mark your name was a risk. This isn't a gift, Leo. It's an investment. I'm not just investing in a landscaping company. I'm investing in the man I saw in that grocery store, the one who was too proud to take a handout, but desperate enough to take a chance. I'm investing in the worker Mark can't stop praising. I handle the books, the legal stuff, the back end. You run the operations. You're the talent. We're partners. 60-40 split, in your favor." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sharp against the cold. I turned away, pretending to fiddle with the snowblower, but I was trembling. This was more than a second chance. This was a belief in me so profound, so unshakable, that it felt like a physical force. He wasn't just giving me a job. He was giving me back my agency, my future, my name. "Why?" I whispered again, the same question from the grocery store, but now laden with a universe of new meaning. This time, his answer was different. "Because the system I served for 20 years, it's built to punish, not to rebuild. I locked away the problem, but I never got to help fix it. With you, I have that chance. This is my redemption too, Leo." In that cold shed, surrounded by the tools of my trade, a new business was born. Not from a business plan, but from a bond forged in the most unlikely of fires. It was no longer just about survival. It was about building something that was truly, completely ours. The following spring, Rooted Landscaping and Design was born. The name was my idea. It was about more than plants. It was about me, about us, about finally being anchored to something good. David handled the incorporation, the insurance, the mountain of paperwork that would have made me quit before I started. He used his severance from the force. He'd taken an early retirement as our seed capital. The weight of that knowledge was immense. He had literally bet his future on mine. We didn't just mow lawns. We built outdoor living spaces, patios, fire pits, water features. I discovered I had a knack for it, for seeing the potential in a cluttered backyard and visualizing a sanctuary. My past, strangely, became an asset. I understood our clients who wanted high walls for privacy, who wanted to create a beautiful, secure world within their own property. I got it. The work was grueling. We were a two-man operation at first, doing everything ourselves. I'd come home so tired I'd fall asleep in my dinner. But it was a different exhaustion. It was the fatigue of creation. Every stone I laid, every tree I planted, felt like a brick in the foundation of my new life. David, despite being the money guy, was right there with me. His city hands growing calloused, his back learning new aches. We were partners in the truest sense. The first year was a roller coaster. We had slow months where the fear was a constant cold companion. We had disasters. A retaining wall that failed after a heavy rain, costing us thousands we didn't have to fix. During one of those crises, I looked at David, my face etched with panic. This is it. We're going to lose everything. He just shook his head, his cop-caliber calm never wavering. We'll fix the wall. We'll learn from it. We don't quit. That's not who we are. Who we are? He always said we. And then the tide turned. A project we did for a well-connected family went viral in their neighborhood Facebook group. Our phone started ringing off the hook. We hired our first employee, then two more. We moved from David's garage into a small, proper office and yard. The business, our fragile seedling, was taking root, spreading, thriving. One evening, after a 16-hour day finishing a big project, David and I were sitting on the tailgate of our truck, looking at the transformed backyard. A flagstone patio, a gentle waterfall, soft landscape lighting illuminating beds of lavender and ornamental grass. It was perfect. "We did good, kid," David said, his voice thick with a pride I knew was for both of us. "We did," I said, the words feeling inadequate for the swell of emotion in my chest. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. "You know, when I arrested you, I saw a kid who'd thrown his life away. But that night, in the grocery store, I didn't see that kid anymore. I saw a man who was lost, and I realized I was a little lost too. The job, it was all I had. And then it was gone. You gave me a purpose, Leo. You gave me something to believe in again." I looked at him, this man who had been my judge, my jury, and was now my partner, my friend, the closest thing to a father I'd had in a decade. The journey hadn't just been my redemption. It had been ours. We had saved each other, the cop and the felon, building something beautiful from the rubble of our broken pasts. We sat there in the gathering dusk, not saying a word, watching the lights twinkle in the garden we had built together, a silent testament to the most powerful force on earth. A second chance. The success of rooted landscaping was a quiet, steady burn, not a flashy explosion. Within 3 years, we weren't just surviving. We were a recognized, sought-after name for high-end residential design. Our projected revenue hit $150,000. The number felt surreal. I'd stare at the spreadsheet David would put in front of me, the clean columns of black ink, and my mind would short-circuit. This was money I couldn't have even conceived of in my old life. It wasn't just wealth. It was validation, etched in dollars and cents. We'd hired a small, loyal team. I made it a point to hire guys who reminded me of myself. Rough edges, questionable pasts, but a desperate fire in their eyes to work. I taught them what I knew, and David, with his quiet, firm integrity, taught them about showing up, about honesty. Our business became a tiny ecosystem of second chances. One crisp autumn day, we were putting the finishing touches on a massive project for a corporate lawyer, a multi-level patio with an outdoor kitchen and a fire feature. It was our biggest contract to date. The client, Mr. Henderson, was a stern, detail-oriented man who had grilled us relentlessly before signing. As we placed the final river rock around the fire pit, he walked out, a rare smile on his face. "This is exceptional work, Leo, truly. You and your partner have a real gift." "Thank you, sir." That means a lot. He leaned against the new stone retaining wall. You know, I did my due diligence. When a company is this new, you check. I found the incorporation papers. Your partner, David Miller. That name sounded familiar. He paused, his eyes sharp and analytical. I remember a case from a few years back. A Sergeant Miller who testified in a burglary ring case. Sharp guy, left the force not long after. That him. The air went still. This was it. The moment I'd always feared. The moment the past would rise up and poison the present. I could lie. Deflect. But I was done hiding. Yes, sir, that's him, I said, my voice steady. He nodded slowly, taking in the pristine yard, the quality of the work. He's a good man to go into business with. A man like that gives a company instant credibility. I felt a strange, powerful courage wash over me. Actually, sir, I said, looking him directly in the eye, the credibility goes the other way. David handles our books and logistics, but I'm the one who designs and builds all this. He's my business partner, but I'm the founder. Mr. Henderson's eyebrows raised slightly. Is that so? Yes, sir, and there's something else you should know. I took a deep breath, the words feeling like stones I had to carry out of a deep well. 6 years ago, David Miller wasn't my partner. He was the arresting officer who put me in cuffs for drug possession. I was a felon, with no future and no hope. He was the one who gave me a chance when no one else would. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. This company, this work, it exists because a good cop saw a human being worth saving inside a kid who'd gotten everything wrong. I braced for the reaction, the disgust, the immediate withdrawal, the demand for a refund. Mr. Henderson was silent for a long time, his gaze sweeping over the patio, the fire pit, the perfectly laid stones. He looked back at me, and his stern lawyer's face had softened into an expression of profound respect. Well, I'll be damned, he said quietly. That's the most powerful business credential I've ever heard. He extended his hand. You've built something beautiful here, Leo, in more ways than one. As I shook his hand, I felt the final, invisible chain around my spirit snap and fall away. I was no longer an ex-con who'd gotten lucky. I was a businessman, an artist, a creator. My past was not erased, but it was no longer my definition. It was just the rocky soil from which something magnificent had managed to grow. That night, I took David out to dinner. A proper steakhouse, my treat. We sat in a warm, wood-paneled booth, the clink of cutlery and the low hum of conversation surrounding us. It was a celebration of the Henderson job, of our success. But it felt like more. It felt like a culmination. Over dessert, I slid a small, wrapped box across the table to him. A small token, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. For believing in me. He looked surprised, then touched. He unwrapped it carefully to find a keychain. It wasn't flashy. It was a simple, polished piece of slate, laser engraved with the rooted logo. On the back it read, To David. The man who didn't just open a door, but helped me build the house. He ran his thumb over the engraving, his eyes glistening in the soft light. He was silent for a long moment. Leo, he began, his voice rough with feeling. There's something I've never told you. Something about the night I arrested you. I took a sip of water, curious. What about it? He looked up from the keychain, his gaze holding mine, filled with a pain I'd never seen before. That night, it was my last patrol. I'd put in my papers. I was done. 20 years on the force, watching the same cycles of pain and punishment, and I felt like I'd never made a real difference. I was just processing people. You were supposed to be my last arrest. Just another file to close before I walked away. The air left my lungs. I stared at him, the noise of the restaurant fading into a distant buzz. I was empty, he continued, his voice barely a whisper. I saw you crying in the back of my car, and all I felt was this profound weariness. I dropped you off at the station, closed the cell door, and I thought, that's it. I'm done with this broken system. He paused, collecting himself. But then I saw you in that grocery store. You were so broken, but you were still fighting. You were trying. And I realized my retirement wasn't an escape. It was a surrender. You gave me a reason to not give up. You weren't just my last arrest, Leo. You were my first real chance to make things right. Investing in you. Building this with you. It wasn't charity. It was my own desperate grab at redemption. You saved me from becoming a bitter retired cop who thought he'd wasted his life. You gave my second act a purpose. I sat there, utterly stunned. The world tilted on its axis once again. All this time, I thought I was the sole beneficiary of this miracle. I thought his grace was a gift bestowed upon me. I never knew I was giving him something in return. I never knew that in saving me, he was saving himself. The cop who arrested me wasn't just my savior. I was his. We looked at each other across the table, two broken men who had somehow become whole by believing in each other. The journey was never just about my second chance. It was about ours, a shared redemption, written not in the cold ink of a police report, but in the rich, dark soil of a future we built together. One beautiful, healing landscape at a time.